You're still watching In The Loop on Bloomberg TV Philippines. The European Union Philippines Business Summit for 2017 has kicked off on a somewhat awkward note at that, because it's coming just days after President Duterte threatened to kick EU ambassadors out of the country. Our correspondent, Beverly Natividad, is live at the event in Soler. Bev, what's going on there?
Well, Sean, government officials actually took turns to be able to downplay the latest tirades of the president versus the European Union. DTI Secretary Lopez was the first to speak here among the public officials who are here, and he lost no time in explaining and addressing that issue head-on, addressing that, in fact, at the beginning of his speech. And he said he clarified to the European officials and businessmen present here that, in fact, the fresh tirades of the Philippine president were directed not towards the EU as a country delegation, but in fact to the Europeans possibly who are present at that group they call the Progressive Alliance and the Party of European Socialists. These remarks, the remarks that were heard by the president, he said, were taken to be foreign interference or interference to domestic affairs of the Philippines. And if these remarks were taken as domestic interference, then that's what affected the Philippine president. And he broke down that reasoning of the president as saying that the Philippines itself doesn't interfere into the domestic affairs of other countries, and so other country partners shouldn't do as well. And he also defended the record of the Philippine president. He said President Duterte has zero tolerance versus abuse in government, and also he doesn't stifle dissent in the Philippines, in fact giving the protesters in the Philippines their very own day of protest last September 21, and that this Philippine president is pro-poor. But according to Lopez, if there are foreign entities who are interfering into Philippine domestic affairs, then that should expect a strong reaction, because the Philippine government is prevented from doing its job, and so that would require a strong reaction from the Philippine president. We also spoke, Sean, to Mr. Taos, the European Chamber of the Philippines president, and he said European businessmen were not affected by this fresh rhetoric from the Philippine president, and he said, well, they're by now used to differentiating between what is rhetoric and what is policy when it comes to the comments made by Philippine President Duterte, and he said by now they're also immune to it. Let's listen to this exchange.
We know rhetoric is rhetoric, and we have taken it with a smile. I think we have issued a statement that was very loud and clear. The issue has been addressed adequately, and I think that should be the end of it.
Of course, in economic terms, I mentioned earlier that when it comes to the exports, they're now our number 2 export market this year. No, last year was number 3. So economic relations been good. Even the GSP utilization or GSP plus utilization has increased from 2015 to 2016, and we expect greater utilization this year because more and more exporters are taking advantage of the GSP plus as they get to be aware also of the privilege, of the trade privilege.
In terms of export, we're the second largest market for the Philippines, and in terms of investment, we are the largest. Europe is the largest investor in the Philippines. And we actively, that's why we are here in this forum, we actively promote bilateral connections between the Philippines and Europe. And yes, we do expect more companies to come in. I think we have verbalized that quite often. We in business do not mingle in politics. That's for the politicians to do. We see to it that business gets addressed and gets addressed adequately. And it has, while it's of course difficult to maneuver in a scenario like this, but it has not stopped investment coming in, and we will certainly not stop right there.
He has made it clear that that will be the position if there's clear interference from any group. And it's good that the recent one was not an EU sanctioned group. So obviously the remarks do not refer to the EU itself, because the EU has clarified that that's not the group did not come from them. No, it wasn't. I think I myself also was surprised with that one.
Well, Sean, of course, the more important point here to make are the trade deals and the actual trade deals and privileges that will stand to be affected if these comments by the president affect any of these, or affect any of the European businessmen or the European country delegation as a whole. And that redounds, of course, to the GSP plus privileges of the Philippines, and of course the ongoing negotiations for an EU-Philippines free trade agreement. In fact, Mr. Lopez said a while ago that the EU-Philippines free trade agreement is still being negotiated and is on track, in fact, in terms of the scheduling of that free trade negotiations, and that the GSP Plus is an important component to be able to negotiate that free trade agreement between the EU and the Philippines. You might have heard in the soundbite also that Mr. Lopez cited that the EU is the second largest export market for the Philippines. I'm not sure what time frame he is citing, but according to the latest data by the PSA, as an export market, the EU is about the fourth largest as of August 2017, and that's about 14.4% share in terms of the total merchandise exports, which is, in terms of amount, is about $790 million, and that one is up 30% compared to a year ago level. So it's still, Sean, very much still on track, but that's why GSP Plus and the EU FTA negotiations should be considered heavily in terms of when weighing into these comments made by the Philippine president. Sean.
All right, thank you very much for that briefer. Beverly Natividad reporting to us live from Soler.